Hey, I'm James. If you're an author and you've just spent a long time writing a book, but now you're faced with the task of promoting it and actually getting people to go out and buy the book, what's a great way to do this? Podcasting. How do you get on podcasts? Well, I'm about to share with you exactly the strategy that I used, and we've talked to a lot of our clients, including many authors, to do exactly that, coming right up. So my name's James Mulvaney. If you're new to this channel, I help entrepreneurs and authors and people just like you get results using podcasting by creating their own podcast, but also by appearing as guests on other people's podcasts. And that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you today about. Give you some pointers of how you can start appearing on podcasts as a guest. If you find this kind of content useful, then remember to hit that subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so you're always notified when I push out new videos, just like this one. And at the end of this video, if you found it useful, remember to give me an all-important thumbs up. You know the drill. Okay, so appearing on podcasts. Perhaps this is something that's new to you. Maybe you're a wordsmith. You're not always thinking, I'm confident. I've never done an interview on the radio before. I've never been on a podcast before. And it can kind of all feel a little bit daunting. Well, I want to break this down today into 3 simple steps. Firstly, defining your story and figuring out what kinds of podcasts that you want to appear on. Secondly, looking at exactly how to tell those stories and how to then go out and find relevant podcasts that are going to be suitable for you to promote your book. And then thirdly, looking at actually what it comes down to when it is time to record. Like, how do you prepare for an interview? What questions should you be prepared for? So let's dive into it. Firstly, if you've written a book, you've already got a decent amount of information or knowledge or a story to tell. Generally, the great thing about books is they're split into different chapters. If you're writing a book, certainly if it's kind of knowledge-based, it's teaching people how to do something or it's sharing information on a specific area of expertise. That's perfect, and it lends itself really well to appearing on podcasts, because of course there's lots and lots of podcasts out there which will teach people how to do things. They'll be relevant for specific topics, and also you could be really super specific about which kinds of podcasts that you're going out and approaching. But even if you're a fiction author and you've written something that's completely based on a story that doesn't exist in the real world, there are also plenty of podcasts out there for you too. So first things first, you need to decide what sort of topics you want to speak on, particularly if you're a non-fiction author, you've written a book which is designed to help people out. So for example, I'm going to say, let's say you've written a book about nutrition and eating healthy, okay? You might look at different areas of nutrition that you talk about throughout your book. And these are your stories. These are things that you're going to be talking about on podcasts. This moves us nicely onto step number 2, which is defining the types of podcasts and really going out and finding podcasts that are relevant for your story. This doesn't necessarily have to be stuff that's really obvious. So for example, if I've written a book on health and nutrition, as I just mentioned, you might have a chapter, say, on protein, okay? For example, that could be something that you're talking about specifically. You're pitching yourself as an expert on the knowledge of protein. And then you might start looking at what sort of podcasts would rely on this information or could include this information to tell part of their story as a podcast. So the obvious answer would be yes, there's lots and lots of health and nutrition podcasts out there, but we need to think further afield. So we might think, okay, how about sports podcasts? And then we could again start drilling down into being really specific. So we might have podcasts that are specifically for people who are running. They might have podcasts for specifically who are people who are looking to build body mass. Your new knowledge as a nutritionist, and specifically your knowledge about protein, could easily be applied to these specific podcasts. So you don't need to necessarily just think, I've written a book on healthy eating and nutrition. Okay, all of the podcasts I'm going to be on need to be specifically about this. It's about tailoring as an author your knowledge and figuring out how you can apply your story to other people. You could even potentially go on a podcast about entrepreneurship and talk about how food is fuel and how healthy eating can help you be more productive as an entrepreneur. There are so many different ways that you can take your knowledge or your expertise and apply it to different niches or different markets within the podcasting world. The next step is to go out and then find podcasts and figure out how do we actually approach these guys and how do we get on them? Now, there's a platform that I'd like to share with you, which is called Matchmaker.fm, which makes it super simple to go out and find podcasts that are actively looking for guests and looking for experts to interview just like you. It's really then a case of searching for podcasts that you think might be relevant, reaching out to them with a compelling pitch and maybe giving them some examples, not just saying, I want to be on your podcast, but here's why I think I could be on your podcast. Here's how I think I can help your audience and how I can deliver value to them as, an author, and ultimately, perhaps be direct and say, look, I'm trying to promote my book. I think it's going to be really useful to your audience, but also remember on each appearance, you need to be delivering as much value as possible. That is so important. Don't just think of podcasts as a way to sell or pitch your product. Think of them as a way to tell stories, have really interesting conversations, and ultimately engage with not only the host, but the audience themselves and deliver value to that audience. So when it comes to recording a podcast, most hosts and quite often people will send you a list of questions beforehand. Sometimes these questions may be generic, sometimes they may be tailored to your area of expertise or the episode that you're going to be recording. The best thing to do when it comes to recording a podcast interview that I find is just make sure you have lots of bullet points. These are things that you can easily reference. If you suddenly start thinking, I don't know what I'm going to say next, you've got a guide that you can easily use to guide yourself from point to point to point. Don't think about writing big chunks of text, and don't think about creating too much of a script, because ultimately it needs to feel conversational. But if you're thinking or starting to freak out because perhaps you've not recorded many podcasts before, it really helps if you've got that bulleted list, little pointers that can lead you on to the next thing. Or if you run out of stuff to say, throw in some little extra golden nuggets of information, stuff from perhaps other chapters of the book that you might find useful for that audience as well. So we've crammed a lot into 8 minutes, I understand, but I've actually created a 6-part video series which I'd like to share with you absolutely free of charge, which will show you in more detail exactly how to go out and find these kinds of podcasts and really give you some guidance on how to turn your knowledge into effective stories. You can go and grab that. It's free of charge on beonpodcast.com. That's beonpodcast.com. Sign up there and get your free copy of my fabulous course, and I think you're going to find it really useful. And if you've got any questions for me, or let's say you're thinking about being on podcasts and maybe you've been on a few, I'd love to know more. Put it in the comments below. I'm always happy to answer any questions that you have. All right, take it easy. Hey, wait, before you go, perhaps you're looking to start a podcast for your business. And did you know that most businesses make the same exact mistakes? Whenever we work with clients who are struggling to get their podcast off the ground, or they're not getting the traction that they deserve, it turns out that most of the time they're making the same mistakes. So what I've done is I've compiled a guide, which is called the 5-Step Business Podcast Checklist, which will show you exactly what you need to know to get your podcast up and running without making the same mistakes that most other people do. So you can download it for free at jamesm.com/podcast. That's jamesm.com/podcast. Go and grab your copy today.